stories from tomorrow onwards and start thinking about things differently, and we co-create new stories. Then these things start to take on their own life as the kind of external kind of macro factors play a role to, like climate change and peak oil. And so in terms of the how, in terms of food, I'm a big fan of forest gardening and a big fan of permaculture approach to food, and that's the approach I'm taking in the future. But then if you can see why I don't talk about the how, because the next person will ask me how I wipe my bum, the next person will ask me how I brush my teeth, the next person will ask, you go into hundreds of questions.
I do wonder why we don't promote no toilet paper usage in the Western world, and why no one seems to really take it up. Maybe I should do it.
Yeah, maybe
it seems self-evident. That's a complete travesty of nature.
Yeah, the compound, I remember in the Indian, if you look at the Indian flag, there's a spinning wheel in the middle of the flag, because it was a symbol of independence was being sought on the basis of you have to actually not just in name get independence, but actually become self-reliant again in a way. And I'd actually, if I had to make a flag tomorrow for Gaia, it would have the compost toilet planted in the middle, because it would represent sanity again. It would represent respecting the earth. It would represent the kind of cyclical nature of nature. Not this linear approach. We take this kind of cyclical way of doing things, and turning your poo into something that can replace Monsanto's fertilizers. Not only are you reducing your need on fertilizers, you're also not polluting your water systems. And this is the approach we need to take to life. We need to start doing more and more of this. Again, as I said about Eisenstein's Descent of Humanity, look up Patrick Whitefield's Earth Care Manual in terms of permaculture. That's a kind of an application of putting into practice the theory in some ways.
Thanks.
Okay, if we go Charlie, Lady in Black, and Phoenix, and then Guy's just put his hand up there. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Cool.
Hi Mark, you touched upon briefly at the start of your talk upon the horrors of industrial society and how it's kind of decimating the planet and raping the oceans and so forth. We all know from the study of history, empirical study, that industrial civilizations seem to butcher indigenous tribes on an industrial scale. First part of my question is, how confident are you that if we do move away from industrial civilization, we won't then become the next indigenous culture to be butchered? And would you recommend some people try and stay behind within this machine system to try and crash it before it keeps attacking another Arab country or starts World War III or wipes out half the planet? I mean, I think it's great that we can move into the forest or move away from the industrial way of life. But this cancer isn't going to disappear if even 50% of it move into the forest. I think the remaining cancer would still attack those who wanted freedom.
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask something like that, Charlie. And to be honest, it's a very, very crucial question. I think if I can sum up, if you don't mind me summing up your two questions in one, because I've gone through a bit of a process, and this is probably a bit more on the kind of controversial side of things, and it's not something people come along for talk of money as a living. It's not something I normally bring up, but Charlie has, so I'll deal with it. That I've gone through a bit of a process for the last few years, and I've learned more and more of the horrors of civilization. We call ourselves, does anybody here think they're violent people? Hands up anybody who considers themselves violent. So if there's any undercover cops in here, there's the guy here. We don't consider ourselves violent people, but our lifestyles are based on violence, because we don't see it every day, because we're not at the receiving end of the stick. We think that we're non-violent, but actually everything that my genes, for example, I have no idea what happened to make these things happen. And I can pretty much say that it was towards it. Put it in perspective, in 1 square inch of soil, there's more life forms than there is human beings on the planet, right? So if you think you're not inflicting violence by the ways of life you have, just consider that one tiny little bit alone. And so anyway, to get back to what Charlie's saying, I came from the very kind of completely non-violent Gandhian approach to money-less living, complete peace. And I still, that is, I want a peaceful world. The concept of violence, it just deplores me in many of its forms. But the fact is, we're not living, we've got to get over this kind of illusion that we're living non-violent lifestyles. We're not. We're probably one of the most violent people of all time. And so in the past, where I have looked upon violence towards the system as being an inherently bad thing and just perpetuating the violence, I now see it as like we're living in this kind of forest. And I don't like to use the analogy of a forest because it's trees, and I'm not recommending anybody cutting down trees. But there's a canopy, and there's some trees have got very aggressive, and for whatever reason they've got to the top, and create this big huge canopy. And there's people, I know so many people in my own community back near Bristol and stuff who are planting beautiful seeds every day. They're scattering really beautiful seeds, whether it be community allotments or share skilling schemes or whatever. But the problem is that very few of them ever take off to any extent, because a seed needs a fertile soil, and it needs light, and the trees are blocking out the light. Because the big trees they've been so aggressive and they've got so big and so strong, no light can get down to these things. And in the green movement, and I'm not saying what side I fall on here because it's a very controversial subject, but in the green movement and all these kind of movements, it's kind of like we kind of criminalise, and we culturally criminalise as well people who cut down the trees. As if only planting the seeds is going to work. And actually, there's a few elements on it. It's actually in order to let some light into these seeds, sometimes there's got to be a bit of tree cutting. And I'm not saying that I want to be somebody who cuts trees, or that you should or you shouldn't cut trees or whatever. I think every single person in this room will be passionate about something in life, and I think the key to life is doing what you're feeling passionate about. We all have a role to play in the change, and I just think it's too simplistic sometimes to think that the person who cuts down the tree is the violent person, and then the people who benefit from the system that we live in is the non-violent person, because it's just not. We're not a non-violent people, and we need to get over that pretty quickly. Our lives are based on violence, and so I'm not saying that we should increase the violence, but we've this kind of cognitive dissonance about things, that we can, on one hand, kind of deplore one element of violence, and then on the other hand, we celebrate it. It's actually an integral part of our lives, and we kind of applaud each other for succeeding in being more and more violent, in kind of what our lives are based on, this kind of success story of producing more and earning more money and our status and all that goes with it. We applaud ourselves for that, and then we kind of deplore the other element of violence that tries to stop that. And so I just think the argument has been far, far, far too simplistic for too long. And that for every person in this room, whether you want to cut down trees or plant seeds, then that's a choice you've got to make for yourself. But I've come to the point again where I want to plant seeds, and who knows what the future holds.
But pruning a tree isn't violent. Pruning branches, they'll grow back.
It's more of a. I'm not sure where your bit of the metaphor is going, but I would love for it to be pruned. To be honest, if we could prune, and I certainly am in saying that there's good people and bad people, and we need to get rid of bad people, because that's part of all of us. I'm talking more about these things exist within us individually. It's not like it's some other person like David Cameron in the corner there. Just give me the finger. It exists in every single one of us. I'm almost saying cut down the tree inside you as well. There's this level of violence inside us, and we need to cut down that tree. If we can prune all these things and find this beautiful harmonious ecosystem again, where everything can flourish and life can come back and everything finds its niche, brilliant. But I just don't want the argument too simplified, because it's not that simple, and it's not a very, it's quite difficult to stand up in the front of a room after you've been talking about kind of spiritual aspects of life and and talking about all the kind of nice things, to kind of then have to answer a question like that and be honest about it in front of people who you love and care for, that it may reflect badly on you, but I like to give an honest answer to an honest question.
Could you answer the question? I haven't heard the answer yet.
Do you
Well,
think
basically,
the answer-
do you trust industrial civilization enough to leave new indigenous cultures alone? And do you also think that, you know, some people should maybe stay behind to, as you say, prune or maybe help crash the slave ship of industrial living?
I don't trust industrialised society to leave indigenous people alone. And if people feel passionate about having industrialised society get off the back of the natural world, you know, the rest of nature, I don't have any problem with that personally.
Okay, there was the lady in black over there. The next question.
Well, just to bring the conversation back to a bit more of a practical level, I do believe that you were saying about foraging that there's not enough hedgerows. Well, there are, but foraging has got a bit of a twee reputation that it's all about making jam and stuff, which in itself is crazy because that's a kind of frivolous product that's dependent on imported sugar. But there is lots and lots of food around us. There's free food because we don't recognise it as food, you know, the nettles and stuff like that, and we don't acknowledge it's food. And there's the other food, which is like improved fruits and stuff being grown in gardens that is wasted